All right. Well, hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in. In today's episode, we have chapters 21, 22, and 23. Now, in chapter 21, if you, this is where I just kind of just give up, and I decided to give up, I'll put it that way. This is where I tell you the name of the song that the Darkman has been playing on the jukebox all these times. And to give you another little hint, a slight hint, and then a big hint as to who he is. Or who he is for the book, I'll put it that way. But anyhow, if you listen closely to his comment that he makes about the song, and you know the lyrics of the song, then you can kind of get a good idea of who his character is. Now he makes a final appearance in the very last chapter that kind of seals up his identity. But you know, you can glean everything you need from the chapter 21 if you know the song and you know the words to the song. But anyhow, like I say, this was the one I was going to have. This was going to be a real Easter egg, and you were just going to get clues to what the song were, and you had to figure out what the song was, and then, you know, if you knew the song great, you could figure it out the rest, and if you didn't, you'd look it up on the internet. But that all went down the drain. So anyhow, today we got chapters 21, 22, and 23. I hope you enjoy them. Chapter 21. The man in black walked into a small bar on the outskirts of town. He went over to the jukebox and selected N17. Momentarily, the Rolling Stones started singing Sympathy for the Devil. He walked up to the bar. The bartender looked around. They were alone. "What will it be, boss?" he asked. "Give me one for the road, Bobby, and have one yourself." "Are you done, boss?" "I think so. Just some slight nudges at the right time usually does the trick." "If you say so," Bobby replied as he downed a shot. The man in black turned to leave. Bobby walked from behind the bar to follow. "You know, I sure like that song, even though they got it completely backwards," the man in black commented as they walked past the jukebox. As the dark man got close to the door, his suit seemed to lighten in color slightly. Bobby's clothes also seemed to lighten in color. By the time they got to the door, their clothes had turned to a light gray. As they stepped outside under the bar's canopy, their clothes went to an off-white. It was a sunny day, and as they stepped into the sunlight, their clothes went to a brilliant white. Their clothes kept getting whiter until they were so brilliant it hurt your eyes to look at them. Their skin even started to emit a slight golden glow. The brilliant light kept growing in intensity until it appeared two small stars were hovering in front of the bar. The two stars, one larger than the other, seemed to rise slightly, and then with two brilliant flashes, disappeared. When the light returned to normal, the bar was gone. In its place was an old rundown building that hadn't been used in years. Chapter 22. It was the first day of his second term, and Walter again found himself at his desk trying to enjoy his morning coffee. He had won re-election by just running on the fact that the economy was booming. Enough senators and representatives had also won, riding on his coattails, that their party now controlled both Senate and the House. It seemed the majority of the general public didn't care about the spike in murders, which his opponent had brought up numerous times during the election. Walter thought this was a little odd, but the dark man had told him not to worry. The murder rate had dropped significantly just recently, although it was still higher than when all this began. His phone buzzed. Walter looked at his coffee cup. "Well, at least half a cup," he said to himself. "Yes. Sorry, Mr. President, but Mr. Dale Foley, one of your science advisors, is here, and he says it's very important. Send him in." Dale Foley came into the office. Walter motioned toward one of the chairs. Dale took a seat. "What's the problem?" The man looked nervous. He knew this president had a habit of firing people on the spot. Dell straightened in his chair and began. Mr. President, it seems the population has gotten out of control a little quicker than we first anticipated. How bad is it? In 2 years at this rate, it's going to have a devastating effect on the economy. You don't know what I've went through to fix this economy. I'm not going to let it go to hell this fast. What are you going to do, sir? I'll take care of it, Walter replied. You just stay on top of the numbers and let me know if the rate changes. Yes, sir, the advisor said, and not really knowing what to do, just sit there. You can go now. But I'll handle it, Walter said in a more assertive voice. This got the advisor moving, and he left the office. Walter touched the little black book tucked in his inside coat pocket. Okay, here we go, he said to himself. Walter touched a button on his desk phone. Yes, sir, came the reply. I would like to have a meeting with all the top executives and owners of all the major broadcast companies. Okay, came a confused voice. And I would like to have it this week, Walter said in a more stern voice. Yes, sir. 2 days later, Walter was sitting in his meeting room, surrounded by the owners and CEOs of all the major broadcast companies. As Walter looked around the room, he came up with a mixed bag of emotions, ranging from scared to mad. Walter leaned back in his chair and cleared his throat. Okay, gentlemen, I'm sure you're wondering why you are here. I will state this as plainly as I can. This country is facing a population problem, and you're going to help me fix it. By the blank stares and open mouths, Walter could tell that he had totally lost them. He continued, Here's what I mean by that. You're going to change your programming to where it's the cool thing not to get pregnant as a teenager, and to only have one child once you become an adult and get married. Walter looked around again. Every jaw had dropped a little lower. Can these guys really be this slow? He thought to himself. Have I lost you? All heads bobbed in unison. Finally, one man spoke up. With all due respect, Mr. President, we don't have that much power. Is that what you think? Which one of you controls MTV? A small man toward the end of the table raised his hand. You, sir, are responsible for getting a whole generation of young men to wear their pants down around their knees, Walter exclaimed. Your programming also promotes premarital sex and drug use, he added. The small man finally found his voice. We don't promote that. Yes, you do. You just don't realize how. Any show that is aired on MTV, whether you're showing something in a good light or bad light, the base subject of that show becomes cool. And that's the part that sticks in the kid's head. The rest of you are guilty of similar offenses. Who here is responsible for the Discovery and the Learning channels? 2 men at Walter's right raised their hands. You two are responsible for creating an artificial bubble in the sale of Harley-Davidson motorcycles and having 2/3 of the population run out and get tattoos. The 2 men looked at each other, but did not reply to Walter's accusation. What do you propose we do? One of the other men asked. Over the course of a couple of seasons, you will alter your programming to reflect that underage sex and having lots of kids is not cool, Walter said. And how do we do that? Came the reply. It's easier than you think. For example, if you're going to do a sitcom about a couple, then they don't have any kids, or they just have one, and you highlight the bonuses they get from that. I will set up a committee of psychologists to help you make suggestions on new programming. This sounds a little unconstitutional, one of the owners explained. It's no more unconstitutional than what you are doing now, Walter replied. But our ratings will plummet. They might at first, but if all of you change at the same time, what's the public going to do? Turn off their TVs? What if we refuse? One of the owners asked. Well, I have some guys over at the FCC that are just watering at the mouth to impose a ton of restrictions on the public and cable broadcast. This sounds like blackmail. No, this is called in the interest of national security, and I think that you will find on that subject that I have a lot of leeway, Walter replied. There was some muffled grumbling, but no one spoke up. Okay, then I look forward to seeing the new programming. Thank you, gentlemen." And with that, Walter left the room. As Walter stepped back into his office, he mumbled to himself, "That's step one. Now for step two." He walked over to his desk and touched the phone. "Yes, sir." "I would like to address a joint meeting with Congress next week." "Yes, sir," came the reply with no hesitation. Smart girl, she learns fast, Walter thought. The next week, Walter found himself standing at the podium addressing Congress. "Ladies and gentlemen, our nation is facing a very dire problem. Our best scientists tell us that due to all the recent disease cures that have become available, we will be facing overpopulation within the next 5 years. Now, I don't want to follow China and make it against the law to have more than one child. I think we can take the high road and reward people that have none or only one child per household. If you have looked at the brief in front of you, you'll see that I propose we overhaul the income tax system. Instead of giving exemptions, or as I call them, rewards, for having more dependents, I suggest we reward the people with none or just one dependent. Of course, we can't take away the exemptions from those that already have them, but we can penalize them for having any more. I know this sounds drastic, but do we want the economy and the country to revert back to the way it was 5 years ago? I think we can learn from our mistakes. I took an oath to protect this country, and I plan on fulfilling it, even if I'm protecting it from itself. I will look forward to signing the finished bill after you have put the final touches on it. Thank you for your time and attention." Walter waited. He expected a loud uproar, turning into total chaos. What he got was a complete surprise. 3 of the senators seated on the front row stood up in unison and started clapping. Others of the same party quickly followed. After that, the applause seemed to be contagious, and after a few minutes, everyone was on their feet, clapping. 1 week after the new income tax population control bill was signed into law, Walter was to attend a benefit fundraiser. That night, as the limousine was coming to a stop outside the banquet hall, it suddenly darted back into the street and accelerated. Inside, all the Secret Service agents were listening intently to their earpieces. "What's going on?" Walter demanded. "They found someone on a roof nearby, Mr. President. We're taking you to a secure location," one of the agents answered. Later that night, in the Oval Office, the director of the Secret Service was giving his report to Walter. "We found a dead body on the roof of one of the buildings overlooking the banquet hall. The man was dressed in camouflage and still holding his sniper rifle." "Did one of your guys take him out?" Walter asked. "No, sir. We had already swept the area. He must have moved in after that." "Then who killed him?" "We don't know. He had 1 bullet wound to the head. In fact, the bullet was lodged in the stock of his rifle. From the angle of the wound, the killer must have been behind and higher than the victim. We think he was on the rooftop of a building behind the victim." "Can you get a view of the banquet hall from there?" Walter asked. "No, sir. The building the victim was on blocks that angle." "So they're policing their own," Walter thought to himself. "Tell them to reschedule the fundraiser," Walter told the director. "But, sir," the director began to protest. "I think I'm safer than you realize. Tell them to reschedule." Chapter 23. Walter sat at his desk in the Oval Office. It was his last year as President of the United States. Walter was hoping he could just coast through this last year. Everything from the murder raids to the economy was getting better. Walter was snapped out of his thoughts by a buzzing noise. It was his cell phone. This immediately worried Walter, because very few people had this number, and those who did knew not to call except in an emergency. Walter glanced at the view screen and saw it was his top economic advisor, Don Hollow. "Hello." "This is Don Hollow, sir." "Yes." "Mr. President, I have something you need to see." "Come to my office as soon as you can." "Yes, sir." Walter hung up and put his head in his hands. So much for coasting, he thought to himself. That afternoon, Don was sitting in front of the president's desk with a pile of paperwork in front of him. Walter looked at the pile of paperwork, then at Don. "What have you got?" "Well, sir, You know, the economy has been improving for several years now. You called me for that? No, sir. We have been keeping an eye out for any inflation that could derail the economy, and we have found that gas prices have risen at an unprecedented rate. We have checked the data, and the price of crude oil has not changed enough to justify the prices of gasoline. The prices just keep creeping up a penny here and a penny there, but at a consistent rate. If they continue at their current rate, it could start to affect the economy. What's your conclusion? Walter asked. Looking at the data, one can only conclude the oil companies are seeing just how much they can milk the public for. I see. What do you think we should do, sir? I'll handle it. You just keep watching for stuff like this. I worked too hard fixing this economy to let someone's greed send it off the cliff again. Yes, sir. With that, Don left the Oval Office. Walter picked up his phone and pressed one of the speed dial buttons. Thomas Gray, how can I help you? Thomas, I remember that you had a good computer guy in your department. Is he still there? Yes, sir. Do you trust him? Yes, sir. Send him over as soon as possible. Yes, sir. Walter hung up, then hit another button that was a direct line to the Deputy Director of the CIA. Yes, sir. I need to have a face-to-face meeting. I can be there first thing in the morning. That will be fine. Just as Walter hung up, his secretary buzzed. Gary Summerfield from Homeland Security is here. Send him in. Gary walked into the Oval Office. To say he was nervous was an understatement. The President motioned to a chair, and Gary took a seat, placing his laptop on his lap. Can I trust you, son? Of course, sir. I'm going to give you a task that has to be kept top secret. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Walter got out 2 sheets of paper and started writing. Presently, he handed them to Gary. One of these is an email I want sent to these people anonymously, and it needs to be untraceable. Is that going to be a problem? No, sir, Gary answered quickly. The second item is a story I want you to get to go viral on the internet, also untraceable. Yes, sir. You might want to read them before answering so quickly. If you trust me, then I trust you, Mr. President. Good man. I will let you know when to post these. It should not be more than a couple of days. That's all, son, and tell Thomas hello for me. The next morning, Alexander Lacey, the Deputy Director of the CIA, was sitting at Walter's desk. I assume you have some sharpshooters in your department, Walter asked. Some of the best, sir. Walter slid a small piece of paper across the desk. There were 2 names on it. I need it to look like just another one of the recent assassinations, and I need them to be as synchronized as you can get. May I ask why? Alexander asked. Interest of national security. Good enough, Alexander answered. 2 days later, Walter got a text. It read, "Done." Walter in turn sent Gary a text that read, "Now." Within a week, the price of gasoline had dropped and continued dropping for the next several weeks. The oil companies said it was from a surplus in their inventory.